Thank you everyone for joining us for today's presentation, The Inevitability of Automation, Robots in Academic Libraries, featuring Edward Iglesias of Central Connecticut State University and Marshall Breeding, an independent consultant specializing in the area of library technologies. While everyone gets settled in, I just want to take a little bit of time to tell you about IGI Global. IGI Global is a publisher of the latest research in information science and technology as applied to business and public administration, engineering, education and healthcare, and social sciences, displayed in our books, ebooks, journals, cases, book bundles, and databases. You will find our presenters' research, along with hundreds of other resources dedicated to the subject of library and information science, in our InfoSci databases, hosting books, journals, teaching cases, and themed collections segmented by discipline and topic. Our InfoSci database offers thousands of course and research supplements. Currently, we are offering a 30-day free trial of our InfoSci databases so you can experience these amazing collections for yourself. For more information, please refer to our website or contact eResources at igiglobal.com. To get started today, I just want to review a few housekeeping items to let you know how you can utilize GoToWebinar software and to better participate in today's web event. Here we're looking at an example of the GoToWebinar attendee interface, which is made up of two parts. The viewer window is on the left, which allows you to see everything that the presenters will share on their screen, and the control panel is at the right. Within the control panel is how you can participate today, so we'll look at that quickly. By clicking the orange arrow, you can open and close your control panel. From the View menu, you can also set the control panel not to auto-hide when it's inactive if you prefer to keep it open throughout the presentation. The audio panel provides audio information. By default, you have joined the webinar via mic and speakers. You can click the audio setup if you prefer to. I'm sorry, I lost my place. You can click the audio setup to select your computer, speaker, or headset devices. If you prefer, you can join the audio via telephone by selecting Use Telephone. If you want to use your telephone, just enter the audio pin that is listed. Today's webinar will be really interactive and collaborative for everyone. We'll reserve time at the end of the presentation for Q&A, but if you have a question or a comment that you'd like to address immediately, feel free to type that into the question box in your control panel. As a final reminder, today's webinar will be recorded, and everyone in attendance will receive an email with a link to view the recording of today's event. Thank you for taking the time to join us. Now I would like to introduce our featured speakers, Edward Iglesias and Marshall Breeding. To give you a little bit of background, Edward Iglesias was born in Laredo, Texas, and lived there most of his life. The environmental bias caused by living in a bilingual, bicultural society has permanently affected his outlook on life. As a result, he is drawn to subjects that don't easily fit description or are a blend of many things. His latest book, Robots in Academic Libraries, is a good example, as the field of library automation and technology is always in flux. Currently, Mr. Iglesias is researching the role of maker spaces in libraries as a way for libraries to continue to be relevant and to provide communities of creation for their users. Marshall Breeding is an author, speaker, and independent consultant specializing in the area of library technologies. He recently concluded a 27-year career at Vanderbilt University, most recently serving as Director for Innovative Technology and Research. He has written 7 books, including Cloud Computing for Libraries and Next Gen Library Catalogs. Mr. Breeding has authored over 500 articles, news stories, and technical reports published in professional and academic publications. His chapter, featured in Edward's book, is entitled Beyond the ILS, A New Generation of Library Service Platforms. At this time, I will turn the presentation over to our guest speakers. We will start the presentation today with Mr. Iglesias. Thank you, gentlemen, for joining us today.
Thank you. Okay, show my screen. Okay, can you see my screen now?
Looks great.
All right. Well, welcome everybody, and thanks for showing up. This is what the book looks like. You probably won't see it at Barnes & Noble, but you know, if you see it at a conference or whatever, pick one up for your library. It's a good book. This is the rough table of contents, which you can also find at the website, just to give you an idea that it's not just about robots in the library. It's basically about automation, but my particular focus was on the role of automated processes, and so robots. And here, like I'm using the particular definition of a robot like an internet bot, anything that can be programmed to automate a task. So if you think of the way that computers get taken over as botnets, well, that's a script running over, taking over your computer and doing a task that you would do, like hit a website or whatever. But when I start talking about this stuff, at least in, the culture that I'm in, the particular library I'm in, around the librarians here in Connecticut and New England, really the first response I get from a lot of people is disbelief, and then I explain what I'm talking about, and they slowly come around for the most part. But I'm going to try to go over just a little bit of what I mean by robots and what I mean by this kind of tendency in automation, this trend. A lot of this came from this book called Race Against the Machine by Eric, Swedish name I can't pronounce, and Andrew McAfee. And there's this, thing that it's not that all human labor is going to be outsourced. It's just that our jobs are going to be changed. Nobody in libraries right now is doing the same thing that they were doing 20 years ago. And there's no reason to expect that in the next 10 years we'll be doing the same thing we're doing now. And this is not all going to hit at once. It's not this a decisive point. It's more of a trend, and you'll see it all around you if you just look. So these are the library areas that I felt are most vulnerable, but these are in alphabetical order because systems is at the very end, and I'm in systems, so naturally. But if you talk to your acquisitions people, with a combination of patron-driven acquisitions and approval plans, really the job has changed dramatically. It used to be, the thing is the limitations on automating a lot of these jobs are not technical. We could easily tomorrow have a system where, at most you'd need a half-time acquisitions library. If everybody used Oasis like they're supposed to, and you click on the little book and you send it in an email to the, or better yet, as part of this online database, and the acquisition person decides, yeah, that's a good book or whatever. But more importantly, if you send Baker and Taylor or whoever $1 million at the beginning of the year and say, yeah, I'm a 4-year undergraduate institution with blah, 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 and do a good profile, well, then they send you a certain number of books a week. It takes a lot of the guesswork out of it. But the reality is that we're still going to have people that are going to circle a book in a catalog and hand it to you or put it in your mailbox. And so the system breaks down because of human failures, not because of technical failures. But that's changing too. The people that would never dream of using an online system a few years ago are slowly coming around, and there are fewer and fewer people that are reluctant to do this. Everybody that uses Amazon to buy a book or whatever is using an online system not unlike this, so there's a lot more familiarity, a lot more comfort with it, and as that happens, the ordering process becomes more streamlined. Cataloging, cataloging is pretty much there. If you wanted to, you could completely eliminate the cataloging department in most academic libraries for 90% of the stuff we have. We're all ordering the same stuff. The places that you can't replace catalogers are like special collections or where you have unique items. But realistically, you can order shelf-ready books with marked records already ready to go, and then it's just a matter of localizing them. How much attention you pay to those records is going to depend largely on the individual institution. But again, that's not a technological issue. That's a people issue. That's a, oh, I'm really tied to my records looking absolutely perfect, rather than, having some kind of standardization. And you see this with, if anybody in cataloging gets marked records from 3 or 4 different places, they're all slightly different. And that's very annoying. They're all marked records. They should all be exactly the same. But the fact is they're all a little bit different, and so you have to massage them. As long as you have these human problems, these little eccentricities of records, you'll need a human being to, clean them up and make them work right. But again, these are technological issues that can be solved. And once people figure out that it will cost a lot less if you have the records all right in the first place, well, then it's only a matter of time before Serial Solutions or Sky River or somebody comes up with the perfect marked records that everybody's going to use, or OCLC. I mean, OCLC pretty much has it in the bag anyway. But then it's, oh, well, we can do it all with all records, but not the ones that aren't in OCLC. Well, that's going to change too. It's going to have to change. Electronic resources and systems, and these are both, I put systems twice accidentally. I apologize. But let me just talk about this right now. This is the one, this is where I work. I work, for a department that's a combination of, I'm the systems librarian, I take care of the ILS, but I also work heavily with databases and, user interface and stuff. My head's on the chopping block. Everybody that's working systems right now, you should be looking for another job. Or at the very least, you should be looking to improve your skill set. As soon as, places start realizing, hey, I can host my ILS with so-and-so, well, that automatically takes away half your job, because all the time you used to spend buying servers, updating servers, maintaining servers, doing firewalls, and all the other stuff that's associated, backups, all the stuff that's associated with having a physical server in-house goes away, and all of a sudden you're limited to loading records, troubleshooting, and if you need an update, calling up the vendor and saying, hey, update me. Or even better, sometimes you get an email that says, hey, you were updated. That's kind of sweet. But it changes the skill set required. Instead of requiring somebody that might have an expertise in hardware, all of a sudden it's all software. All of a sudden it's all remote. All of a sudden it's dealing with vendors a lot more. So where you spent maybe half your time on the command line, now half your time is on the phone or on emails with a vendor trying to get what you want done. And it's frustrating because you could do it yourself, but it's so much cheaper to do it this other way. Again, these are human problems, but the technical skills are there. So anybody that's in systems work, you're in a great position and you're in a lousy position. You're in a great position because you understand the technology that's involved in the library probably better than anybody. You're in a lousy position because if you've done your job right, you've just about automated yourself out of a job. And if you haven't done that, you're not really doing your job. It's just the nature of the game. Reference. Everybody thinks, reference is completely safe because you can't replace people, answering questions. But the fact is, a lot of what reference used to do is no longer done. If you want to know who the 10th president of the United States was, well, you look it up in Google. And it's silly to think that somebody would come and ask a reference librarian to, help them find facts on file or something to show them what they want. Most ready reference is already gone. It's a lost battle. Most reference people, the way they're going to survive is by doing instruction and by doing high-level customized reference assistance. Where, you need somebody to do a patent search, or you need graduate students that need help with, assignments that, just won't get, solved with, your standard databases, and all of a sudden you have to remember how to do a complex query in this database you use once a year. That's where reference is gonna survive. But ready reference is pretty much gone, and that is something that is quite susceptible to being taken over by artificial intelligence. If you look at our chatbot article, it's not there yet. But this is why I included the Stuart Brand article. About technology rolling you over. Just because it doesn't look finished and polished right now, good enough is good enough for most people, and it's going to get better. It's just going to have to get better because it's Moore's law. It's inevitable. So now that I've got you depressed, you got to remember Bear Grylls and all those survival guides. Survival depends on hope, that and having a good multi-tool. So, you avoid defeatism. There is hope. And, you need to know that this is an issue, that this is something that your directors are thinking about, that your Board of Regents is thinking about. The people that decide whether or not they can afford another salaried employee that's going to require a pension or an IRA or whatever, or if they can just pay somebody X amount of money to just take care of it. It's not just outsourcing; it's automating. And the scale of the problem will, of course, vary tremendously at your library. If you're at a Tier 1 research institution, at Harvard or Yale, they're going to be going a lot longer because they have a lot more unique stuff that just can't be automated. I have yet to see a robot that can correctly handle a rare book, or that at least will trust to handle, that priceless artifact. Even if they do, well, I have a feeling, and it's absolutely true. Right now we're letting robots operate on human beings, but by God, you stay away from Newton's Principia. There's certain things we have that are important, but at the same time, when you're in the library, if you're in an average-sized library, and I'm in an average-sized library, 4-year institution with some master's degrees, and we got one EDD, part of a consortium, that's a pretty average library. There are a lot of things that can be rendered much more efficient, and the least efficient way to do something most of the time is to hire a full-time worker that's going to get a pension from the state. That's like the most expensive solution there is. So the only time you do that is when there's no other choice. So the response to this, I would say, is basically learn. Learn new skills. There are a lot of skills out there that people will learn and can learn that are going to be needed for new librarians. But we don't even know what those skills are yet, not for sure. So you've got to stay on top of things, and you've got to stay abreast of the new technologies and new trends. Look at the best practices. Look at the libraries that are actually succeeding. Don't just look in your own backyard, because chances are the library down the street is looking at you to figure out what they should be doing. You need to look at new models of organizational structure, and I talk about this quite a bit in the chapter. If you've got a library that's designed around the modules in an ILS, circulation, cataloging, acquisitions, that might not be the most efficient way to structure a library, and we need to start thinking seriously about that. We need to think about new missions. One of the areas that I'm really interested in is this idea of maker spaces in libraries, where libraries are all of a sudden becoming centers of innovation and creativity, and it fits in with their mission very well. But it's all new skills. All of a sudden, you're having to deal with 3D modeling, or, as some libraries do, circulating lockpick kits. Well, that might not fly over some places, but it might in others. Bless you. Best practices. What are the libraries that are thriving doing? And just look at why they're thriving. And this is a big one. How do the staff spend their time? I mean, if you go into especially one of the newer public libraries, I'm amazed at the really successful public libraries. They don't look anything like the libraries I remember from when I was a kid. Academic libraries take longer to change, but a lot of academic libraries are really changing not just the look and feel of their physical environment, but how their staff spend their time. Think about, do you still provide services your patrons need? You look at things like microfilm. Well, yeah, there's some things that are only available in microfilm. Does that mean that your patrons want it or need it? You need to ask these big monster questions. Count everything, especially the idea of virtual visits. I'm liaison to computer sciences at my institution, and the computer sciences people tell me they never send anybody to the library because they can get everything they want online through the IEEE database or whatever. They just have no need of the physical space, but they still use the library heavily, and you have to be able to count that. I mentioned makerspaces again. We've always been in places where people come to create things. It's just we usually associate them with two-dimensional paper things, research papers, projects. But increasingly now, there's this ability to do three-dimensional projects, to use to learn things in new ways, and that will cause some discomfort and some excitement in your library. Some people will say that has nothing to do with what I got into libraries for, and just as many people will say, hey, that's great, that's exciting, that's something new. Again, flexibility is key. You're not going to be doing the same thing you're doing right now in a few years, and so you have to focus on skills that are very hard to teach a robot or to automate. Among systems librarians, there's an old saying, if you do something more than 3 times, create a script to automate it. And that's absolutely true. So this is where, and a complete disclaimer here, this is just what I think. This isn't, some scientific study or whatever. But just from what I've observed, design is something that is really kind of come into play in libraries, and is already in play in libraries, in a lot of libraries. Not just from the point of view of actually designing like a library newsletter or a website, but design principles in management, where you start looking at things as how do you craft a solution to a problem. Computers are still lousy teachers. On the one hand, they're great teachers because they are infinitely patient. On the other hand, if you ask them a question, they only have one answer. Facilitation with communities, as it becomes more and more important to show the university, or I come from university background, so this is what I think of, that yes, we still need libraries in an age of Google. Well, it isn't good enough to just say that. You have to show it. And there has to be a way for a library to get people out into the community and actually show them why we're indispensable. Make yourself obviously necessary. And planning and project management are something that, unfortunately, these are skills that we need to acquire and do better jobs with. In the technology world, we're used to, thinking in terms of projects and thinking in terms of, well, first you do this, then you do this, then you do this. But in the library world, that sometimes has a very hard time playing out, because all of a sudden you get end of year money and you've got $80,000 that you have to spend. or you've got you have half as much money as you did last year, and all of a sudden you've got to get rid of stuff. So this whole idea of learning to plan, learning to be agile, that's also just something that's going to be very important. Machines can't flow. This is the this idea that you can get completely immersed in something. So that also means that machines can't be creative, and that machines can't really do research, at least not in the sense of discovering something new. They can do research. As a matter of fact, one of the examples in Race Against the Machine is that this law firm hired this company to do research for a law firm, and they had 30 lawyers do the same research, and they had the software run the same research as an experiment. Well, the 30 lawyers were only right 50% of the time. The machine was right about 75% of the time. That says a lot about the machine's ability to flow through text and to get concepts and to bring forward the information you need. And that's something that as librarians we should be paying attention to, because it isn't that machines can't find this stuff, it's that they can't interpret it. Finally, my don't be a horse thing. This is something I discovered, and I love the name of this book, Apollo to Alms, about, horses were really important in the economic life of England for a long time. And all of a sudden, they went from 3.25 million to about 2 million in the span of a few years because of the Industrial Revolution. And it wasn't because they couldn't do their jobs. It wasn't because they didn't do the jobs well. It's just that the machines came along that did them so much faster and cheaper that they could no longer afford to keep the horses. They couldn't keep them fed. And I would hate to see a point where librarians are driven down and down in salary because the skills we have aren't relevant anymore. And so it's important that if we're going to stay around, we need to have relevant skills. And now on that bright note, let me turn it over to Marshall. How do I do that? Stop showing screen. Change presenter.
Yep.
Okay, is my screen showing it?
Yep, perfect.
Just a second. Okay. So I want to talk about the chapter that I contributed to the book. My area of interest and expertise really has to do with kind of library automation systems and discovery systems and the different kinds of technology that libraries use for kind of their strategic automation purposes. So when I wrote my chapter, that's kind of the ground that I wanted to cover. And so today I want to spend, just a few minutes kind of hitting the high spots of that. Obviously, I can't go into a lot of the detail that's there in the chapter. If you're interested, I encourage you to take a look at that. So I look at automation from kind of several different perspectives. Two basic ones would be that of discovery and kind of patron-facing interfaces, and the other is kind of the back end of library automation. What automation systems and so forth do libraries use to manage their collections and to provide the services that surround those. Let's talk about the front end of things. How we, what is our presentation to library users through our websites, through our discovery services, and so forth. When I think about, most library websites and academic libraries, and I spend a lot of time looking at them. I have a database of of libraries and their websites and their catalogs. So, I spend a lot of time kind of looking to see what libraries are doing as far as their virtual presence. So my observation is that it's not a very integrated thing. In fact, it's a pretty fragmented view when you look at most academic library websites. Is it essentially, you have silos, of unconnected silos. We have, different components of it. We may have some search components such as the library's online catalog or discovery system, another search box to search the website, different kind of finding tools for articles. Libraries are heavily invested in scholarly articles, so there tends to be a lot of tools for kind of helping users get to those articles, open URL link resolvers, that kind of thing. Local digital collections, federated search, and all these kinds of things. And the only thing they have in common sometimes is that you get to them from the library's website. It's hard to get from one thing to another, even within the whole of the library's web presence. So, that fragmented approach, I don't necessarily think is the best that we could do. When you think about the typical online catalog that an academic library might have on its website, if it's the online catalog module of its integrated library system, is it the best front door to the library's collection and the services related? What's in scope and what's not. It's essentially just a catalog of the MARC records that are managed by the ILS, and that increasingly is just such a small part of what libraries consider, in their collections. When you think of all of the articles represented in the subscriptions that libraries have, hundreds of millions of articles, well, you don't even find those in a typical library catalog. It doesn't index them at the article level. Book chapters, digital objects in collections, all those kinds of things. In fact, it misses more than it hits. So I would suggest that the online catalog isn't such a good front door. And libraries have been working on trying to have better catalogs and interfaces to their collections. I followed the next generation library catalog genre of software. It's still going on to a certain extent. It tried to improve the online catalogs a bit, adding kind of better tools with some of the features here that you see, kind of making them work a little bit more like the interface conventions on the web, but it didn't really improve the scope that much. You're able to index a few more things, maybe the local collections, but it's still having to kind of go out to federated search or something like that to be able to get at these article level resources that academic libraries are so heavily invested in. And this federated search technology, it doesn't perform all that well. A variety of different discovery interface and discovery services have come out. This is not necessarily a new genre of software. For example, you see Aqua Browser Library, it came out in 2002. So we've been doing next generation catalogs for a decade now or longer, and we're seeing some important improvements in that. The one I want to point out especially is what I see happening in recent years, in fact the last 3 or 4 years, where discovery services are now available that index library collections at the article level. They're cognizant of the subscriptions that a library has and is able to create, there's an index of most of that content that can then be profiled to what the library actually subscribes to. So these index-based discovery services, often called web-scale discovery services, are really important move forward in how we can provide access to library collections to our users in a much more intuitive way that meets kind of what they expect when they see a search box. Being able to have all these different kinds of content represented in that index, limited to what the library actually has access to, and then using as many clues as you can in order to be able to present those results according to the most interest and the most relevancy and scholarly value and so forth by knowing something about how the content is used, things like scholarly, different ways to measure its scholarly interests, citation rankings, and those kinds of things, and then know something about the user. So, I mentioned EBSCO Discovery Service, Summon from Serial Solution, EBSCO's Primo and Primo Central, and WorldCat Local as examples of these discovery services that really follow this ambitious route of indexing, pretty much everything that a library would consider a collection. I don't have time to go into kind of what's missing and some problems related to that. This is a pretty idealistic view that I hope to see get better all the time. We're not there yet. How is the discovery piece of things doing today? I would say in academic libraries, fewer libraries are presenting their online catalog as the main search box. Many are investing in discovery services that better leverage the investments that they make in electronic content, as well as preserving good access to the print collections as well. These index-based search products are kind of where a lot of the action is as far as libraries licensing and acquiring new discovery services, and I think they're all getting better. That the indexes are becoming more comprehensive, the relevancy is getting better all the time, there's better cooperation between the publishers and providers of content and with those who are creating these discovery services. So even though we're not there yet, I see a lot of improvement. I would also mention the NISO Open Discovery Initiative. I'm a co-chair of this group. We've been working since about 2011 to be able to improve this ecosystem among libraries, discovery service providers, and content providers. So I want to look at the back end of automation for a few minutes. What are the next generation library management systems looking like? Today when I think about what a typical academic library has, it's kind of like the front end. It's kind of fragmented, a bunch of different components that do different things that don't communicate with each other very well. They might have an integrated library system, library management system for managing primarily the print collections, journal collections at the title level. They have the acquisitions module of the ILS that they deal with money. They also have to deal with the ERP system of the university often. What is the system of record for financial transactions that the library does? How do they provide access to ebooks? Usually multiple different resource sharing and interlibrary loan systems. What do you use to manage these electronic resources? A typical academic library may spend 80% or more of their collections budget on electronic content. So where does that get? Oops, sorry. Did I lose my screen? It popped off of mine.
Still there.
Okay, I just can't see it. Hang on just a second. Okay, now I can see what I'm talking about again, so sorry. So it's all pretty fragmented. I was talking about electronic resource management, where, what is it that you do to manage these electronic resources? So often I see that content, that information representing 80% of the investment being done informally on spreadsheets and little homegrown databases instead of being under systematic management. So all these different kinds of pieces go on behind the scenes that I don't think is the way we would invent it if we had to do it again today. I show this kind of graphic of a typical integrated library system, kind of how it's shaped behind the scenes of different modules and databases. It's kind of a complex piece of software that was built, it was designed to manage print resources, and because of the way it was built, really hasn't been able to evolve that well into the realm of electronic resource management, which is just so strategically important for academic libraries today. There were a lot of electronic resource management systems that were developed, I would say they were developed, not many of them were really sold and implemented to libraries. There are many tens, if not hundreds of thousands of integrated library systems that have been deployed over the years, but only a few hundred electronic resource management systems have been deployed simply because they were kind of too complex to really work well, and they didn't communicate well with integrated library systems. So it was really a challenge to try to automate an academic library using an electronic resource management system for one set of things and an ILS for the other. In fact, what most academic libraries do, I would suggest, is represented by this graphic, where you're managing 20% of your assets with this large integrated library system and all the people it takes to make it work. And then most of your assets and value are being managed informally through databases and spreadsheets and so forth. So there's really a lack of systematic management. And despite all of that, there are a lot of pieces of what academic libraries do that are entirely unautomated. What kind of automation support is there for the provision of reference information services? You know, how many reference departments simply just use tick marks to measure the questions that are asked? That's not the kind of customer relationship management that you would see other places. So what I'm looking for is something that's more comprehensive in the way that it manages libraries and their operations and their collections. You know, it just isn't tenable to have all these different pieces and parts that don't work together well in order to be able to automate what an academic library does today. So I would say that, you know, we need to take a step back, either evolve the systems or revolutionize systems so that they are a better match to what actually happens in academic libraries today. Get away from a pieces and parts approach to something that's more comprehensive, unified, service-oriented, and so forth. And the good news is that there are products that are being built in that model today. I'll mention a couple of them in a minute, but I don't want to keep calling them integrated library systems because they're not really. I mean, they're integrated in the library systems, but they're not like this. They're not like the legacy ILS systems that we've been using for the last 30 years. So I came up with a term that I think has been picked up pretty widely to describe this new genre of library management software. I call it library services platforms because it's library-specific software. It's service-oriented in a lot of different ways. The service-oriented architecture, it uses web services to be able to extend APIs for extensibility and interoperability, and facilitates the ways that libraries deliver their services in kind of a functional kind of way as well. And then platform, because it's what we call big pieces of software, but especially because it's consistent with the platform as a service concept in cloud computing, where this is something that library programmers can write software against to do additional things. So they have some other characteristics, such as highly shared metadata, instead of isolated databases, library by library. They tend to be delivered through multi-tenant software as a service implementations. They deal with all kinds of metadata. In addition to MARC, they do Dublin Core, MIDS, MOTS, you know, whatever it is. They're not just myopic when it comes to ways to do metadata. Hopefully these systems will be well prepared for BibFrame and things like it that are coming down the pike that will fundamentally change the way that libraries deal with metadata. That's a whole other presentation. And they're open with APIs, so you can do more things with them. Just quickly mention the ones that I've been following. These are there are others, but I just mentioned a few of them. There's OCLC's World Share Management System. It's been out since about 2009 or 10. Alma from Ex Libris has been under development for a while. There are many libraries now in production. And TODA is still in development from our friends at Serial Solution. They have InTODA Assessment as the initial module of that available today. Sierra Services Platform from Innovative Interfaces, kind of an evolutionary approach to create a library services platform from their Millennium ILS Quali-LA in development as a community source version of this model. And then I don't have it mentioned on the slide, but DTLS has their platform called Open Skies that they're talking about that will be out soon as well. So this just gives a little bit more information about where they are as far as development implementation. Different of these organizations have different levels of resources, kind of writing software and doing all the things it takes to roll out and support a new system. Just some numbers there from other reports. And then the open systems, I think, is an important part of these new systems. We want them to be open. We want them not to be black boxes, but really be something that allow library technologists to extend and do interesting things with. I especially highlight the open API approach, which means that a library programmer who knows something like Perl or Ruby or PHP is able to do interesting things to be able to use the data in the system, express the functionality in the system through different interfaces and so forth. So it's not just what is delivered by the vendor. It's a toolkit that allows libraries to do more and more. One thing that I kind of wanted to mention is that the role of the systems librarian is changing, like Edward mentioned. I think that libraries will always need great technologists to do what they do. I also think they will always benefit that those technologists will be able to do kind of more interesting and better things. It's clear that the world is moving away from local servers that you install operating systems on and software and that you see and touch and have to maintain locally to software that's delivered purely through the web. What I think that means is that library technologists have a chance to work much higher up in the stack. Instead of kind of working on plumbing that really is a commodity as far as servers and networks and operating systems, you're able to really add value to what the library does by taking the library-specific knowledge, the tools that are available through APIs and other kinds of toolkits to be able to do things that aren't being done already as far as improving and doing new things on the library's website and even on its physical presence than you had time to do before. So I think all of this is kind of good news when it comes to library technologists, that you can really use your knowledge in better kinds of ways to have a better impact on the library. This is a slide that I show that kind of shows my kind of overall vision of what a library automation system should look like. That there are still multiple things going on behind the scenes. The library services platform, I think, ties them together better than Integrated Library System did because it's built out of this service-oriented architecture and can really serve more as a system bus to be an enterprise system bus to connect things together that is within the library's own technical environment, the university's environment, and the library business partners' environments and so forth. But the main point is that there's a unified presentation layer that using things like APIs and other kinds of techniques is able to take full responsibility for the customer experience and not just hand off a library patron from one interface to another provided by the library and its suppliers, but rather to have something much more unified, much more consistent with what patrons would expect on the web. So I'll just conclude by saying that all of this vision isn't done yet, but we're kind of at the beginning of the cycle. Some discovery systems have been out for a while, and I expect to see more and more uptake of those. I expect those systems to get better. New generation library services platforms, some are available now, are in production, are being implemented. Others are still in development. But the completion of the development and, more importantly, the implementation of them by libraries is something that will take a longer while. These are cycles that kind of take, 5 or 10 years to really fully develop before most libraries are really using this model of automation. So I think we're at an interesting time where, I see a lot of these transitions underway, and it'll be interesting to see how they play out and if it really improves the way that libraries develop their services and so forth. So I expect more, and I think we're just going to stop there. I've used my time, and I really wanted to, just give a glimpse of some of the things that we've been talking about. So I hope we have some time for questions. I should change the presenter back to Edward. See if I can do that.
You can change it to me,
Edward,
Marshall.
Yeah, I
Okay.
was going to say, actually change it back to.
Okay, change presenter to you. Okay, got it.
Perfect. Yeah, so please everyone type in any questions or comments you might have about this session. Thank you both very much for presenting. That was a great presentation.
Sure.
No problem.
Now, I'm not seeing the questions, should I?
I can announce them. I don't know
Okay.
if you can reach them from your screen.
Yeah, I just see our comments, but not theirs.
Right. Give it a couple of minutes. Does anyone have any questions? I'm not sure if they're not coming through. Oh, here we go. Ari asked, how much would these transformations be slowed by fiscal constraints? How much would these transformations be slowed by fiscal constraints?
I guess he's talking to me, the general, well, I mean, it could be for both of us, but yeah, fiscal constraints are part of the human issue that, you aren't going to, I think that fiscal constraints are going to be what are going to drive most of the changes rather than restrict them. If it's cheaper to automate something, then you will do it. On the other hand, if you have, a well-entrenched staff that, you don't want to change things or you can't change things, that'll be more of a change that you can't control. It's a lot of times it isn't down to dollars alone. But, yeah, I think that fiscal constraints are what are driving automation rather than the other way around.
Yeah, and I would chime in to say, certainly the budget and fiscal aspects of things can be a limiting factor. But I would also point out that, libraries, spend huge amounts on investments in content, in the print collections and in their electronic collections. So, what's the right level of investment that libraries ought to also make in overhead in order to be able to best leverage those collections? And so I think it often means that, yeah, you may have to invest some in a discovery system or a more efficient back-end management system. I would also suggest that libraries think about how much antiquated systems, conceptually antiquated systems, cost them in terms of how efficiently they can actually provide their services. When you're kind of always swimming upstream, when the system that you use isn't well designed for what it is that you do, then I think there are some costs associated with that. You may think that, well, the system is bought and paid for, we're paying a lot of maintenance on it, but you're also paying for a lot of other things to kind of work around that system. So I think there comes a time when the overall balance sheet is for the good when you think about making investments in current technology. So I wouldn't just kind of think that, well, libraries are poor and they have to use the same software they've used for the last 10 or 15 years, but rather libraries have few resources. How can you best spend them to maximize access to what they have and what they do?
Ari responded, interesting perspectives, I appreciate it. Something for me to think about over time. Give it another minute.
Kind of a quiet group, it sounds like.
Right, yeah, definitely.
Looks like we still have 39 with us.
Very quiet group.
I'm not getting any more questions. Maybe you just explained yourselves very well. Oh, here we go. Here we go. Thoughts on ebook use, DRM.
So I can jump in with that one. And the question, how you approach ebooks is a bit different in academic than public libraries. In public libraries, this is kind of the main deal these days when it comes to collections and technology. Interest in downloadable, lendable ebooks is just skyrocketing for public libraries. And I think that this is a case where I think academic libraries will probably feel the intensity of interest a bit later on. Academic libraries, a lot of the ebooks that we're involved with are kind of wrapped up in databases and aggregated products, and they're kind of mostly read in the form of chapters of PDF files and kind of read on the screen. It's not the same kind of downloadable read a novel kind of ebooks that public libraries have. That said, I think it's important to master this technology. Interest in ebooks is profound, and it's important to be able to provide the same level of access for discovery and lending and related services for ebooks as that we've always done for print books. And there's a lot of activity in this arena. I think that digital rights management will be with us, probably for a long time. It's much it adds a lot of complication to it, but I think it's really the case that it's something that libraries simply have to master and never take as an excuse not to do it. We don't like DRM, so therefore we're not going to get involved with systems that use it. But if we do that, we'll certainly set ourselves away from kind of this arena of ebook lending where DRM is currently a pretty big reality. So what I see happening now is a lot of integration between ebook service providers and discovery and catalog providers, so that instead of just being able to click on Overdrive and take them to their site and find and download an ebook, that all of that functionality is becoming integrated into library catalogs and discovery interfaces through this emerging set of APIs that are being exposed by the ebook providers and are being consumed by those who build catalogs and discovery services to be able to deliver kind of an integrated, seamless way within the library's own interface for patrons to find what ebooks are available along with print books and other materials, to be able to put holds on them if they're available to download and read them, and see what they have checked out, both print and electronic, just kind of all integrated service and discovery, across print and electronic. So, it's just a hugely important area right now that I hope the progress that's underway continues to mature.
Yeah, and another area that I think libraries are going to get involved in a little bit is as textbooks become more and more available as ebooks. Well, that puts real questions like, if we've got, a textbook on a hold or reserve, can we do that with an electronic text? Or, right now we're lending out Kindles for kind of a leisure leisure reading collection, because we can get, out of copyright stuff, and the books are free and you can just load them up. But these are, temporary solutions. We don't have an adequate way of dealing with DRM books, at least not that I've seen at the academic level, and especially with, academic publishers, they hold on to their rights pretty well.
Ari had a follow-up. Integration hastened by implementing RDA. I'm not sure if is integrate.
All yours.
Okay.
So, RDA is this new set of cataloging rules that is what will supersede AACR2. So just make sure we're clear what we're talking about. RDA became a production reality, a few months ago, and it's a big deal and it's not. I mean, if you're a cataloger and you're now having to deal with copy cataloging records that are coming in according to RDA, well, how does that fit into your system? Do you have the policies for indexing, display, and all of that in your automated system so that all of the new fields and fields that are used differently according to RDA will all work right? So, and then those of you who practice cataloging, of course, you've had to go through all these webinars and training to get up to speed and all of that. But what I would suggest the real perspective is what are the metadata principles that we need in order to be able to take ourselves to the next generation. I think RDA is a baby step there. RDA was designed, I think, to kind of make library metadata a bit more compatible with the realm of linked data in the semantic web, but it's just a tiny and baby step. I think what you really need to be paying attention to are kind of the more fundamental changes that are on the horizon, such as taking MARC bibliographic information, mapping it into linked data structures in RDF triple stores and so forth. And you see that playing out today in what's called BibFrame. So look at bibframe.org. It is a initiative launched by the Library of Congress to see what bibliographic data would look and work like in this linked data environment. And whereas RDA is a baby step, BibFrame is a giant step in taking library metadata, into the realities, I think, of how metadata is managed in other spaces today. It will increasingly be managed in this linked data environment.
We had a question from Richard who asked, this question is for Edward, any thoughts on deprofessionalism of librarians and automation, or is the profession just changing, delegating core traditional tasks to machines?
Well, I think that what Marshall said about the changing roles of systems librarians and other technically oriented people is that right on the money. It isn't that one is de-professional or one is more professional. I mean, we all know that the MLS is basically a union card. There's absolutely no reason why somebody with a computer science degree couldn't be a better systems librarian than a MLS systems librarian. I think that our field is going to change to start reflecting that a little bit. But who knows? I could be totally wrong on that. I don't think that, I think that the people that are left after a lot of things get automated are going to be very professional and going to be the ones that can do a lot of different things. And the people that are in the most danger of losing their jobs or being labeled redundant or deprofessionalized or whatever are people that do things like, well, you know, that a machine could do, you know, put books back on the shelf. Well, that's a student worker job. It's always been a student worker job. It's only a matter of time before, you know, you get a little robot that can put the books back on the shelf. And even if you don't, it's not going to be a professional job. And I think that a lot of the jobs that, you know, that used to be, I guess, paraprofessional is the word, you know, sticking spine labels onto books, or you know, putting the little strip in the book, all that stuff's automated. All that stuff is, you know, you can get your book with the 3M strip and the spine label and all that stuff. Where, you know, it's those jobs that are almost little library niche jobs that haven't changed a lot. Well, if there's a machine that can do that better and faster and cheaper, then you should watch out. On the other hand, if there's stuff that you can do that a machine can't do, teach a class or answer really complex reference questions or do original cataloging, you know, on a rare item, then there's going to be just as much need as ever for people like that. And also in the technology field, people that can work with these open OAI standards or APIs, you know, that's not going to go away.
We had a bunch of thank yous. Thanks for your presentation. Mata said, looking forward to having this applied to my country.
Wonder what country it was.
Yeah, we have a chapter in the book from a guy in Brazil who talked about the automation of Brazil and how it kind of leapfrogged. They went from basically card catalogs, actually card catalogs, to discovery layers with nothing in between, you know, because all of a sudden they got money and everything rolled out. And it's kind of interesting.
Michelangelo says hello.
Hello. Oh, he's the guy that wrote the article from Brazil.
Exactly, right. I should have used his last name. He was like, it's me that Iglesias is talking about. And Mato, who was like, oh, I can't wait for this to be implemented in my country, is in Jeddah City, Saudi Arabia.
Oh, cool.
So, yeah.
We have a very international crowd here.
Definitely, yeah. And I think that might be all the questions. Everybody's just coming in and saying thank you. Thank you all for joining us again. I think we're pretty much ready to wrap it up. Are you guys okay with that? Okay. Again, just to remind you, our webinar today has been recorded and everyone will receive a link to access it directly. It is also available on our website under online symposiums, where you can also access our previously recorded symposium archive. Next month's symposium will feature Professor Robert Schultz of the University of Oregon. His presentation will be entitled, this is a little bit different, Technology versus Ecology, the Conflict Between Man and Nature, which is a discussion on his forthcoming publication. I will provide the sign up to that in your follow-up email. That'll provide the link for today's symposium as well. So I'd like to have that out on Monday. You can expect that. Once again, thank you all very much for joining us today. Thank you so much, Edward and Marshall, for joining and for creating a wonderful presentation like that. Thank you so much for explaining everything and for your research and time invested. We hope to see everyone at upcoming presentations. If you have any questions in the meantime, definitely feel free to email me or contact me. You'll have all my information through the emails that I send as well. So thanks again to everyone and have a wonderful day.
Thanks, Ann.
Okay.